Next slide. So today I'm going to be talking, this is the title of my presentation. It's called Playtime and Power, where I want to try and explain and introduce a few concepts in social culture theory through a very accessible medium such as Toy Story 3. So next slide. So first of course, all of us know and love Toy Story 3. Toy Story 1 was the first ever 3D animated film in the world. 1999, made a lot of money. You had Toy Story 2 afterwards, which was a sequel, and then you have Toy Story 3. The essence of Toy Story, it is, what if toys were alive? It's not just inanimate beings that we play with. What if they had real emotions? What if they went through their own journeys? What if they had their own secret lives that we never knew of? What if that conflict between them? So that is essentially what Toy Story is. Toy Story 3, in my opinion, the definitive Toy Story film, the end of the original trilogy, one of the best of all time. But next slide. So this is what you'll usually remember Toy Story for, which is the 4 ending, as I call it. All the toys that sort of headed towards the incinerator. They don't really know what's going to happen. It seems like the toys are going to metaphorically die. They're going to get destroyed. But then this is next slide. This is the actual ending of it, where you have Andy, who was the kid who the toys played with from the very beginning. He sort of passes on his toys. So the overall theme of Toy Story is this letting go, the process of letting go. In Toy Story 1, you realize that toys have life and they have an owner. But towards the end of Toy Story 3, it's sort of the audience is also grown up along with the toys, and it's this very culminating film where the viewers as well as the toys learn to let go and move on and they find some closure. But we'll rewind back next slide. So we'll rewind back a little and let's look at Sunnyside Daycare in Toy Story 3. This is where most of the film sort of happens, and it's sort of presented as a utopia for anyone watching the film. So this is why I want to talk about the playtime of my presentation, which is Welcome to Sunnyside Daycare. Next slide. So just to set the scene once again, Andy, he was 8 years old in the first film when he first got Buzz, and then Woody and Buzz, they have their own altercation. By the time you come to the third film, Andy's 18 years old, he's about to move on to college, and he doesn't really want to play with the toys anymore. And next slide. So this is where we sort of have this schism, or we have the difference of opinion of what a toy's purpose is between Andy's toys. So Woody here, he believes that a toy's purpose is to merely be a child's plaything. That's all you are, that's your purpose, to be this creative, imaginative outlet for a child, for one particular single owner, and that's all your job in life is. But the other toys, they have a different philosophy where they believe that a toy should forever be played with no matter what. And if they're being thrown away, if they're being shelved somewhere, then they're not really living their purpose as a toy. That is what they feel, and that's what it leads to the schism or difference between the two. And here comes Sunnyside Daycare, which is sort of presented as this utopia of sorts. Next slide. So you can see how it is. Yeah.
I want to see it! Oh, it's my turn! New toys!
This is the welcome the toys have at Sunnyside Daycare when we first come in.
Howdy, glad to meet you.
Buzz Lightyear at your service.
Oh, thank you. Oh, may I? Ooh.
Well, hello there.
Yeah, so that is Lotso. His official name is Lotso Hagenbear, but you just call him Lotso throughout the film. So he is supposedly this head of the sort of utopic state where everyone is allowed to play with, and he explains it himself. Next slide. Next slide again.
You're safe now. We're all cast-offs here. We've been dumped, donated, yard sales, second-handed, and just plain thrown out. But just you wait. You'll find being donated was the best thing that ever happened to you.
Mr. Lotso, do toys here get played with every day?
All day long, 5 days a week.
But what happens when the kids grow up?
Well, now I'll tell you. When the kids get old, new ones come in. When they get old, new ones replace them. You'll never be outgrown or neglected, never abandoned or forgotten. No owners means no heartbreak.
It's a miracle.
So you see how this daycare is supposedly the best thing possible for toys. It's not that the toy gets replaced, but rather the owners themselves. And every single time one batch of owners pass, there's a new set that comes in. So the toy is always appreciated, always played with. So that's supposedly the best solution that's possible. It's also, you can talk about it in terms of less consumerism, all of these other themes can also sort of be associated with this. But let's talk about this specific aspect of being played with. And then next slide. So Lotso introduces two different rooms that exist in Sunnyside Daycare. The first is the caterpillar room. That it is a bunch of younger kids, I think up to like age 5 or so. They are smaller kids who have a lot more energy, a lot more enthusiasm. They are the ones who are there in the caterpillar room, and that's where Andy's toys are put in as well. And next slide. You have the butterfly room, which is slightly more older kids, aged from like 6 to 10, 12 or so. Again, there are also kids at a daycare, but they're slightly older kids. And also introduces the entirety of Sunnyside to all of Andy's toys and talks about how it's the best thing possible. But then, not everything in Sunnyside is as it seems, and that's where you come to the power aspect which I'm talking about in this presentation, specifically through Lotso the Bear. Next slide. So this is a frame from when you discover Lotso's backstory. It sort of revealed that how at one point he was a toy that was abandoned, was sort of cast away, and then he discovers Sunnyside, and he sort of rigs the whole system, as one of the toys puts it. He rigs the system to his own benefit, that only certain people benefit in a certain way. Let's find out how. Next slide. So this is from the caterpillar room.
Oh, speaking of playtime, they're lining up out there. How
This is
many?
the first time
Must be
Andy's toys
dozens.
were played with in the caterpillar
Playful,
room.
everyone.
And you can see how they're very enthusiastic, but the toys that are already there, they're hiding away. And you're not really sure what's happening.
At last, I'm gonna get played with.
Rex?
Come to Papa.
So you can see the dichotomy there, right? How in the caterpillar room versus how in the butterfly room the toys are being played with. And again, this was supposed to be this utopia. This was supposed to be the place where toys are safe and nothing ever bad happens to them. But obviously that's not happening. So when Buzz brings it up with Lotso, this is sort of what he had to say, and pay attention to what he says specifically, Lotso.
Calling you up to the big league, son. From now on, you'll have anything you want.
Excellent. I'll go get my friend.
Whoa, hold on there, boss. Those Caterpillar kids need someone to play with.
But my friends don't belong to me.
Oh, none of us do. I agree, which is why, for the good of our community, we ask the newer toys, the stronger ones, to take on the hardships the rest of us can't bear anymore.
Well, I guess that makes sense.
So the last exchange between the two, that is something to know, where Lotso explains the concept of Sunnyside once again to Buzz, and he says, you guys are the newer toys, you're more stronger than us, no one deserves to live like that. But we can't do it, but you guys can. And that is why you guys should do it. And hear what Buzz says in the end. I guess it makes sense. That's the most telling aspect, because as you can see, this is a construct that Lotso has made. This is not something that existed in Sunnyside, and neither should the system ever exist this way. But this is what he's created. This is a new hierarchy that he's made. And it's given to you in this sort of common sense approach where, like, you know what, it does make sense that, can you move to that? So this is the idea of cultural hegemony. Next slide. This was proposed by an Italian thinker called Antonio Gramsci during World War II. He was imprisoned by fascist Italian, the Mussolini government at the time, and he sort of came up with this theory to explain why certain inequalities, why certain systemic hierarchies exist. And that's because this is not a natural system, what is there in Sunnyside, but it is presented as a natural system, that it is the way that makes sense. This is how the toys are, this is how the toys are, and they should be. You work your way up to the top, and those at the top, you can get all the benefits that exist. And this is an artificial construct, it is not natural, the way it also claims to be. And next, so this is sort of the main part which he says, coercion achieved through consent. What Buzz says in the end, I guess it makes sense. That's the way power is perpetuated all throughout the system. That's the way they're able to uphold power and maintain power across the hierarchy, because it makes sense. It seems common sense. Through consent is how they get it. And it's not just the way power is put down on people, it's also the way in general a society functions. So the next slide. What do you think of when you look at this? What is the first thing that comes to mind? Marriage. Anything else?
And ornament to wear.
Ornament to wear, marriage, engagement, drinks, that sort of thing. Do move to the next slide. So, of course, as soon as you see a diamond ring, you think of marriage, you think of engagement, that sort of thing. Now think about it. Why is it that a diamond ring is what you immediately associate with engagement and marriage? Why not a ruby ring? Or why not a sapphire ring? Or why not even something like amber, which is so very rare in the natural world? Diamonds, in that way, are a lot more common. But why is it that a diamond is the marker of marriage, a marker of engagement, a marker of betrothal, and not any other thing? So, next slide. What do you immediately think of when you look at this? Movies, obviously. So yeah, you immediately think of, next slide. You immediately think of movies, right? Popcorn and movies. Why can't it be another snack? Why can't you have, let's say, a plate of chole bhature while you're watching the newest Avatar film? Or why can't you even have a pack of Lay's chips? Why is it always popcorn? And these are things to think about. This is, again, cultural hegemony in action, where certain acts, certain things are normalized. They seem common sense. If you ever, so next slide you can go. As soon as you see this, what do you think of?
Birthday.
Birthday cake, right? So, and why, so for example now, if you've gone through a breakup and you have to eat something, what would you usually eat?
Ice cream.
Tub of ice cream, right? Why is no one not eating a tub of ice cream at a birthday? Why is no one putting candles into a tub of ice cream and blowing that out? And why are people not eating cake when they go through a breakup? Again, in a normal systemic general sense, why is this arrangement of cakes and candles immediately remind you of a birthday, and why does that remind you of something else? That's because we have sort of grown up with this in this way. This is exactly cultural hegemony in action, where certain actions are considered the norm. This is how it should be, this is how it naturally is, and this is how it is going to continue. So, next slide, of course, you think of birthday cake. Even something as simple as color. What is blue? What is pink? Yeah, next slide. So, even something as simple as just a color has hegemonic notions to it, where something is considered the norm, something is considered this is how it should be and natural. So, the next slide, this is sort of the key takeaway from cultural hegemony, coercion through consent. You sort of agree to whatever is happening. Again, coercion need not be oppression. It's also coercion where as soon as a birthday comes, you are coerced or forced to buy a cake. That is also coercion. You are not being forced to it, no one's having a knife at your throat. But it is this natural compulsion to do something. That is what coercion generally means in hegemonic terms. So but now to think about, now if coercion is the general way through consent, what if someone doesn't give you consent? What if someone says, hey, I understand what you're saying, but I'll say no, I don't really agree with this. What ends up happening then? So next slide.
My friends don't belong there.
It's the same
None
thing,
of us do.
but
I agree,
a little more
which is
clear.
why, for the good of our community, we ask the newer toys, the stronger ones, to take on the hardships the rest of us can't bear anymore.
Well, I guess that makes sense. But I can't accept. We're a family. We stay together.
Family man, huh? I understand. Put him back in the timeout chair. Bring in the bookworm.
So as soon as Buzz said no, immediately physical force is put on him, immediately he's put back in the chair, his hands are bound, and what ends up happening after this is that he's brainwashed. So again, in the logic of the Toy Story universe, brainwashes, he's put back to his factory default settings, where he thinks he's a space ranger who's discovering a foreign planet and Lotso is sort of his commander. So he's put back, he's quote unquote brainwashed, and then next slide, you see this happen to the other toys.
Explain our overnight accommodations.
Sir, yes, sir. Prisoners sleep in their cells. Any prisoner caught outside their cell spends the night in the box. Roll call at dusk and dawn. Any prisoner misses roll call spends the night in the box. Prisoners do not speak unless spoken to. Any prisoner talks back spends the night
In the box. Get it.
At ease, soldier. They're neutralized. But remember, they'll say anything to make you doubt yourself.
Don't worry, Commander. Any doubt I had got pounded out of me at the academy.
Listen up, folks. We got a way of doing things here at Sunnyside. If you start at the bottom, pay your dues, life here can be a dream come true. But if you break our rules, step out of line, try to check out early, well, you're just hurting yourself.
So you see that, right? As soon as you go against the status quo, you go against the established norm, you're immediately punished for it. So next slide. So this is a continuation of what Gramsci was talking about in hegemony. You have the French philosopher and theorist called Louis Althusser. Next slide. He came up with this way of explanation called the ISA and the RSA. So the ISA is what he calls the intellectual state apparatus. This is the way the state maintains power through ideology. They don't really necessarily use force. They try to exploit the society, they maintain power through ideology, through systems that already exist. What are the main systems? Schools. So if you paid attention to what Buzz was saying, when Lotso was saying they'll try to influence you and you gotta be careful. He says this very specifically. Any doubt I had got pounded out of me at the academy. The academy, like he's a space marine, he went to like a marine academy, the space marine academy, basically school, basically an educational system. So again, something like that. Now, for example, why am I here, a lone person standing in front, while there are a lot more of you than me there? Why am I the one speaking and why are you the guys listening in silence? Why are you talking only when I talk? It's because we've been conditioned this way, right? Ever since we are young, ever since we've been put in a school, there's a teacher standing in front, writing on the blackboard or explaining, and multitude of students sitting and listening. That is the system, that is the structure we've developed. And it continues not only to a school, it continues forward as well. When you're in a meeting, for example, there's going to be one boss instructing multiple employees. There's always going to be one supervisor inspecting a lot of workers. This is the internalization of a certain structure, and this is something what school does. There's also religion, of course. It's most visible in our contemporary day, be it in India through Hindutva politics, USA through MAGA Christian. Familial rules, why is the father at the head of the table, why does the mother not sit there? Why does the woman or the mother or the sister have to cook in the kitchen while the father sits and looks at news or watches sports? Again, your media. Any sort of propaganda that you get through media, even the reportage of certain events. What if there are two separate headlines? Someone says 5 civilians killed in Israeli airstrikes versus 5 children massacred in Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. There are 2 different headlines talking about the exact same thing. But because of the way media functions, because of the way we receive and are receptive to media, you get two very different meanings based on these two article headlines. So that again, media, and then of course political parties, dominant culture. So this is what the ISA does. It tries to normalize power, it tries to establish or rather maintain established power through ideology. But when that doesn't work, when people stand up and say no, that's when the repressive state apparatus comes in. And again, this is through brute physical force. And again, can be physical force as well as legal coercion. So you have even something as simple as the constitution is an example of the repressive state apparatus, because if you go against what is given in the constitution, if you go against the rules, you're penalized for it. So you have your legal courts, you have those systems, of course you have the police. If you are not abiding by the rules, someone steps up with a danda in hand and beats you up. Something simple as the police or the government or even prison systems like we saw. Prisons are one of the biggest ways that the repressive state apparatus works, where you are actually punished for not following the system. You are actually punished for not following the law. And again, the law is another way of just representing the repressive state apparatus, because laws, they provide frameworks which are actually borders. Human society, human nature as is unbound, unfree, free, full of potential. But it is laws that provide frameworks within which you can function. You cannot function beyond it. So something as simple as laws and legals and systems, they are part of the repressive state apparatus. So we saw the cultural hegemony, it is coercion through consent. That's how we understood it broadly. Next slide. Through the RSA and ISA, we can understand that it is coercion and consent. The intellectual state apparatus tries to take your consent, tries to sort of get your approval of certain systems you are undergoing, but if you are not accepting of that, then you have coercion through the repressive state apparatus that sort of hits you. But coming to the last part, why am I talking about post-truth? Why am I talking about hegemony, RSA and ISA? Why am I mentioning any sort of cultural theory or social theory? The reason is very simple. You look at what you are, look at the places you live around, the people you're surrounded by, look at your own life, and that explains a lot about the sort of systems you're in, the sort of conditions you're in. So one of my friends, so this is a project all of us are doing, one of my friends, you would have noticed, in your Instagram reels, you would have something called the trad wife culture that exists, right? Where there are certain people who come on and say, you know what, I'm going to make my own clothes, I'm not going to put my child in school, I'm going to homeschool them, I'm going to grow my own food, I'm not going to buy anything from a supermarket whatsoever, and I'm going to make them good Christians, I'm going to make them good followers of the church. Why? Because there's a certain system I believe in. My man is going to go out and earn for me while I'm going to be at home cooking and cleaning and taking after the kids. So there are three ways you can respond. There are some people who look at it and obviously agree with it, and they say, you know what, it makes sense. Modern society has gone too far that side, we are too modern, we are too liberal, we have to go back to cultural values that we hold sacred and dear. So that is one way of looking at the same thing. Someone else, they sort of negotiated with, where they say, you know what, there are some things that make sense. Schools have gone a little bad, and then food that we get in supermarkets is poisoned. But there are some things I don't really agree with. So I'm going to take what I want and I'm going to distance myself away from what I don't like. But then of course there's the third kind of person who says, you know what, I completely disagree with whatever you said. You're going completely against whatever feminism stood for and fought for, so I'm not going to agree with you at all. You have three different responses to the same piece of media. This is something that another theorist called Stuart Hall, he talks about in his theory called reception theory. How there are three different ways of looking at the same media in a similar way. So one of my other friends, she was doing this thing called the monstrous feminine, where you're looking at something and there is this certain tendency of demonizing or vilifying the women, especially women who are in power. So they are called witches, they are called ghosts, they are shooed away. You have something called Salem witch trials that erupted. Most contemporary theorists, they think that the Salem witch trials happened simply because the men and the patriarchal system then wanted to stop any sort of dissent from the women. So any woman who spoke out, she was termed mad or she was termed to be practicing witchcraft and she was burned at the stake. That is the contemporary way. Even now, and for example, when Kamala Harris was running for the presidency, there were a lot of sort of witch terms that were thrown at her. In any case, in any system, when Indira Gandhi was in power, of course she did the emergency, but there is a certain demonizing narrative of the woman that happens in contemporary society. So that is another way of looking at our own world, looking at what we've been through and analyzing it in a certain way. So that is why you need cultural theory, that you are able to analyze the systems around you and see it in terms of what they actually are, what they are telling you they are, and how they are actually affecting you. And how to look at cultural theory? Very simple. Look at the life around you. Look at the media you consume. So something like Toy Story 3 is a film all of us would have watched in our childhood. It gave us a lot of closure, it gave us a lot of emotional depth. But these are some other things you can look at. Even something like, let's say, A Bug's Life. It's another Pixar film. It's a great way of representing what class revolution and social revolution and what Marx talks about when he says class consciousness. That's what it is, the ants coming together to fight against the grasshoppers, their overlords. So that's another great example. So that's how you can engage with cultural theory as well. Look at the life around you, look at the systems and the media you're a part of, and think a little more deeply about what structures they are, what they present themselves as, and what sort of effect they